"You're just a janitor," she laughed. He then signed the paper that owned her company. She laughed when Daniel Voss asked her to move her coffee cup so he could wipe the conference table. Serena Marsh laughed loud enough for the 3 junior associates beside her to hear, loud enough to bounce off the glass walls of the 31st floor, and said, "You're just a janitor. Wipe around it." The conference room at Aldgate and Pierce occupied the corner of the 31st floor, with the kind of view that costs more per square foot than most people earn in a year. Serena Marsh stood at the head of that room in a blazer that announced its price through its silence. Senior partner at 38. The kind of woman who had learned early that authority was partly performance and had been performing it at increasing volume ever since. She had been at Aldgate and Pierce for 11 years. She knew every person in that building who mattered and had a working theory about everyone who didn't. Daniel Voss, to Serena Marsh, did not matter. He was in gray work clothes with a Pinnacle Facilities lanyard. He had a cart. He had a cloth. He had asked her quietly to move her coffee so he could do his job. He was 41 years old, and he had been mopping floors and wiping conference tables in this building for 9 months, 5 days a week, leaving at 3 to pick up his daughter from school. He had not told anyone in this building who he was. He had not planned to. The 3 junior associates looked at their laptops. One of them, a young woman named Rachel Park, 3 months into her first real job, did not laugh. She moved slightly away from Serena, a distance of perhaps 4 inches, and looked at the floor. Serena turned back to her presentation. Daniel wiped the table, moved the cloth around the untouched coffee cup, said nothing, pushed the cart to the next section. What Serena Marsh did not know was that the building she worked in, the building Aldgate and Pierce had leased for 14 years, the building whose 31st floor she treated as the physical expression of her own importance, was owned by a holding company called Vantage Properties LLC. What she did not know was that Vantage Properties LLC was wholly owned by a man named Daniel Voss. What none of them knew, not Serena, not the 3 associates, not the managing partner who nodded at Daniel in the elevator without looking at his face, was that Aldgate and Pierce's lease was up for renewal in 31 days, that the lease negotiation had been ongoing for 4 months, that the managing partner, Gerald Finch, had been trying to reach the owner of Vantage Properties for 3 weeks without a response, and that the owner of Vantage Properties was, at this exact moment, wiping the coffee ring Daniel himself had left on the counter in the break room 6 minutes ago because he was thorough about his work. By the time Serena Marsh understood what she had laughed at, she would not have a corner office on the 31st floor. She would not have a 31st floor. She would be in Gerald Finch's office listening to him explain, very carefully, that her conduct, documented, witnessed, consistent, had made her the reason Aldgate and Pierce had just lost their lease renewal, at a rate increase that would require a floor reduction and a restructuring that would, among other things, eliminate 3 senior partner positions, her position among them. But first, Daniel Voss had a table to finish and a daughter to pick up at 3 o'clock. 10 hours earlier, Daniel had been awake at 5, not from anxiety, from habit. He had been a 5 a.m. person since his 20s, when building Vantage Properties had required the hours that other people weren't using. He'd found, since stepping back, that the habit remained even when the urgency was gone. He used it differently now, quieter. He made coffee, stood at the window of the apartment, not the house. He'd sold the house when the marriage ended, when Penny was 4, when the decision had been made that the life he'd built was impressive and consuming, and he was going to miss his daughter growing up inside it. The apartment was smaller. It had a good kitchen and a room for Penny with a window that caught the afternoon light, and it was 12 minutes from her school. and those were the things that mattered. Penny was still asleep. She was 9 now. She slept with the complete commitment of a child who had decided that sleep, like most things she cared about, deserved her full attention. He had taken the Pinnacle Facilities job 8 months ago on what he'd told his attorney was a social experiment, and what he'd told himself was something he didn't have a clean word for yet. He had been running Vantage Properties, or having it run, in the latter years, from a distance of increasing remove. He had gotten very good at the financial architecture of real estate and very bad at knowing what the buildings he owned actually felt like from the inside. He'd wanted to know. He'd started with one building, the building where Aldgate and Pierce was his largest tenant, whose lease was coming up, whose culture had gotten back to him through 3 different channels as the kind of culture that consumed junior staff and rewarded performance at the cost of decency. He wanted to see it himself. He had told Pinnacle he was between careers and needed flexible hours. Pinnacle had been pleased to have someone reliable who showed up on time and did not need managing. He was genuinely good at the work. He was thorough. He did not cut corners. He had discovered, somewhere in the first month, that there was a satisfaction in work that had clear completion. A surface cleaned, a hallway done, a floor that was visibly better than it had been. He had not had that clarity in the last 4 years of running Vantage from the corner office of his own making. Penny appeared in the kitchen at 6:30. School uniform, one shoe on, the other in her hand, in the process of putting it on while walking, which was a system she had developed and which he had stopped arguing with. "You're already up," she said, as if this was notable. "I'm always already up." "I know. I just always expect you not to be." She finished the shoe, sat at the table. "Did you make the good eggs?" "I was going to make cereal." She looked at him with a patience that had genuine depth. "You have time for eggs. I have time for cereal, Dad." "Fine," he said. "Eggs." She smiled the small, controlled smile of someone whose position has been vindicated by events. She helped herself to orange juice and opened her book. She was in the middle of something about a girl who discovers she can talk to horses, which Penny had told him was scientifically implausible, but emotionally resonant. He made the eggs. He thought about the lease. Gerald Finch had called again yesterday. Daniel had seen the notification, had not answered, would not answer until the day he chose to. The renewal negotiation had been dragging because Daniel was not ready to conclude it. He was still learning what he needed to learn about the building he'd owned for 11 years and visited, in any meaningful sense, for the past 9 months. He had learned quite a lot. He thought about Serena Marsh, who had been on his informal list since month 2. He thought about the junior associate, Rachel Park, who he'd noticed in the elevator 3 weeks ago, holding a stack of files she was struggling with, when another senior partner had walked past without offering to hold the door. She had caught it herself. She'd said nothing. She had the particular composure of someone very new who had decided to watch carefully before concluding anything. He liked that quality. It was rare. He set the eggs in front of Penny. She ate them with focused appreciation, which was the highest form of praise she offered for cooking. "Big day?" she said. "Average day," he said. She studied him the way she sometimes did, with the unhurried attention of someone who was not yet old enough to pretend not to notice things. "You always say that when it's a big day," she said. "You said it before the thing with the Morrow building." He had forgotten she'd noticed that. "It might be a big day," he said. She nodded, returned to her book. She had learned, living with him, that some information arrived in its own time and that asking for it early just produced less of it. He dropped her at school at 8:15. She kissed his cheek at the car door which she still did without being asked, which he considered the clearest evidence that he had done at least one thing right. He watched her walk in, the particular walk of a child who knew where she was going and was neither hurrying nor dawdling, but simply moving at the speed of someone with a destination. He drove to the building, parked in the service lot, badged in through the service entrance, put on the gray uniform, picked up his cart. He had 31 days left on the lease. He had decided this morning, over eggs that Penny had been right about, that today was the day. The 31st floor ran at full speed by 8:30. Daniel had learned its rhythms the way you learn any space you're responsible for. Not the official version, but the actual one. Who arrived first and why? Which conference rooms got double booked and whose fault it was? Where the temperature was wrong and had been reported 3 times without action. What the hallways sounded like at 9 a.m. versus 2 p.m. versus the last hour before close. When the junior staff stayed and the senior staff left for dinners they expensed back to clients. He was wiping down the corridor near the South Conference Room when Serena Marsh emerged at 9:45 with the 3 associates in tow. She was mid-sentence. Something about a client call that hadn't gone how she'd wanted. And she walked directly through the section he was cleaning without adjusting her path, so that he had to move the cart or be walked into, and he moved the cart. She didn't notice. The associates followed her, the last one, Rachel Park, pausing fractionally, making a micro-adjustment to step around his cart rather than through his clean section, then continuing. She didn't make eye contact. She just stepped around. He had noticed Rachel Park before. Small things. She was 3 months in and already walking differently than the other junior associates, less performance, more attention. She asked questions in hallways rather than meeting rooms. She brought her own lunch and ate it at her desk and shared it once with the building's overnight security guard, whose name she'd learned in her first week. Daniel knew the overnight guard's name too. It was Victor. He and Victor had a standing conversation about whether the building's south elevator was genuinely slower than the north, or whether it was perceptual. They had not resolved it. He had finished the corridor and was moving the cart toward the service elevator when he heard Serena Marsh's voice through the conference room glass, carrying the way voices do in rooms that are mostly glass. He asked me to move my coffee. A laugh. I told him to wipe around it. They look at you like you owe them something. Laughter from 2 of the 3 associates. The third, he couldn't see who from this angle, did not contribute. He pressed the elevator button. The south elevator arrived in 11 seconds. He noted this for Victor. Rachel Park found him in the copy room at noon. Not looking for him specifically, she was there for paper. The printer on 31 had run out and she'd been sent. And she stopped short when she saw him restocking the shelves with the same methodical focus he brought to every task. "Oh, sorry," she said. "I just need paper." "Second shelf," he said. 2 reams left. She got them, turned to go. Stopped. "I want to say." She paused, with the precision of someone choosing words. "What happened in the conference room this morning?" I didn't laugh. "I know," he said. "I saw." She looked at him. He had a calm she didn't quite know how to place, not resignation, not performance. Just the settled quality of someone who knew something she didn't and was not in a hurry for her to know it. "It wasn't right," she said. "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." A pause. Something in the room shifted slightly. The way it shifts when 2 people have just said something true to each other and don't know what to do with the space afterward. "I'm Rachel Park," she said. "Daniel Voss?" She shook his hand, glanced at the lanyard. "How long have you been with Pinnacle?" 9 months. She nodded slowly. There was a question she wasn't asking. He could see it, the same quality he'd noticed before. The careful watching before concluding. "Before this?" she said. "Real estate," he said. She looked at him steadily. Filed that somewhere. Did not ask the next question. "Well," she said, "I should get back." "Second shelf," he said. "If you need more later." She left. He watched her go with the expression of someone observing something that was going where he expected, at a pace that was right. What Rachel Park did not know, walking back to her desk with 2 reams of paper, was that she had just shaken hands with the man who owned the building she worked in and was, at this moment, deciding what to do about the building she worked in. What she also didn't know was that she was the only person on the 31st floor whose name he had looked up voluntarily. Everyone else he had filed from observation. Rachel Park he had looked up in the building's tenant roster on week 3 after the elevator incident with the files, because he had found himself wondering who she was and where she'd come from. She had graduated top of her class. She had turned down 2 larger firms to come to Aldgate and Pierce because one of the partners, not Serena, had a reputation for developing junior talent rather than consuming it. That partner had left 6 months ago. Rachel had been navigating the result ever since. He had finished his morning work and was taking his lunch break in the service stairwell. He preferred the stairwell to the break room. It was quieter. When his phone showed a text from Gerald Finch's assistant, "Mr. Finch would like to schedule a call with the principals of Vantage Properties at their earliest convenience." He looked at it for a moment. He texted his own attorney. Tomorrow. Morning. In person. He ate his lunch. He thought about Penny. He thought about the eggs and the shoe she put on while walking and the horse book and the way she had said, "I just always expect you not to be." And how much of his life before the apartment had been spent being the person she hadn't expected. He thought about what he was going to do in the morning. Then he finished his lunch and went back to work, because the south corridor still needed the baseboards done, and he was not a man who left baseboards. Gerald Finch was 57, managing partner for 8 years, the kind of pragmatic institutionalist who had kept Aldgate and Pierce functioning through 2 market corrections and 1 scandal by moving carefully and listening to the right people. He was not cruel. He was not kind. He was efficient. And efficiency at his level sometimes looked like one, and sometimes like the other. He had been trying to reach the principals of Vantage Properties for 3 weeks. His assistant had been trying for 5. The lease renewal was 30 days out. The rate increase Vantage had proposed was significant, 22% over 5 years, and Gerald wanted to negotiate. He had assumed silence was a negotiating tactic. He had been prepared to counter. What walked into his conference room at 9 a.m. on Wednesday was not what he had prepared for. Daniel Voss arrived in a suit, not the gray uniform, not the pinnacle lanyard, with his attorney, a woman named Clara Huang, who had been handling his real estate interests for 6 years and whose expression communicated precisely and efficiently that she had done this kind of meeting before and found it clarifying. Gerald Finch looked at Daniel Voss for a moment. He stopped, looked at his assistant, who shrugged almost imperceptibly. "You work in the building?" "I do," Daniel said, "until today." He sat down. Clara set a folder on the table. The folder contained the lease renewal terms. Final terms, not an opening position. Clara had explained to Gerald's attorney in a brief call the previous evening that there would be no negotiation on the rate. There would, however, be conversation about something else. 22%, Gerald said carefully. "Yes," Daniel said. A pause. Gerald was doing the math in real time, the floor reduction it implied, the restructuring, the positions that would not survive it. He was a practical man. He was already identifying which positions those would be. Is there anything, Gerald said, with the deliberate calm of someone who has accepted a situation and is now managing it, that would affect these terms? Daniel looked at him. Yes, he said. One thing. Clara slid a second document across the table. Gerald read it. His expression did not change, but something behind it did. A controlled recalibration, the kind that takes years to develop. The document was a conduct report. 9 months of documented observations. Specific dates, specific incidents, specific witnesses. Serena Marsh's name appeared 7 times. The conference room incident was 3rd. 6 were worse. I'm not in the business of personnel decisions, Daniel said. But I am in the business of knowing what happens in my buildings, and I've spent 9 months learning what happens in this one. He paused. The rate is the rate. What happens to it from here depends on Aldgate and Pierce, not on me. Gerald Finch looked at the document for a long time. I'll need until Friday, he said. You have until Friday, Daniel said. He stood. Clara collected the folder. They walked out. In the elevator on the way down, Clara looked at him. You're not going to make them fire her, she said. You're going to let them decide. Yes, he said. And if they don't? Then the rate stays at 22% and they lose 2 floors and restructure, and she'll survive it the way people like that always survive it, by finding somewhere else to land. He watched the numbers descend. But Gerald Finch is a practical man. He'll look at 7 incidents and do the math. Clara looked at him. Why did you spend 9 months mopping floors? He was quiet for a moment. The elevator reached the lobby. Because I wanted to know what I owned, he said. Not the financials, the thing itself. He stepped out, and I found out. On Friday afternoon, Serena Marsh was called into Gerald Finch's office at 4 p.m. The meeting lasted 19 minutes. Gerald had his HR director present and a document he slid across his desk at minute 3. His voice was level and his language was careful and he was not unkind, but he was completely clear. Serena's position was being eliminated as part of a structural review necessitated by lease renegotiation outcomes. The review had identified, additionally, a pattern of conduct inconsistent with the firm's stated values. 7 incidents, documented, witnessed, spanning 22 months. The first was not the conference room. The conference room was number 3. Her severance was fair. Her reference would be professional. Her office needed to be cleared by end-of-day Monday. Serena sat very still through the 19 minutes. She asked, at minute 14, who had filed the conduct report. Gerald told her it had originated with the building's ownership. She was quiet for a moment. The building's ownership, she said. Vantage Properties, Gerald said. Yes. She looked at the document. At the 3rd incident. At the date, the time, the room number, the names of the 3 witnesses. At the note at the bottom. Subject asked to move coffee cup to allow surface cleaning. Request refused. Verbal dismissal of maintenance staff in presence of junior associates. She thought about the gray uniform, the cart, the quiet. She thought about the coffee she had not moved. Gerald watched her understand. He had seen this moment before, in various forms. He found it, as always, neither satisfying nor regrettable, just the arithmetic of choices. Is there anything else? Serena said. Her voice was controlled. She was good at controlled. No, Gerald said. I'm sorry it came to this. She stood. She left. In the hallway, she passed Rachel Park, who was at the printer, and did not speak. Rachel watched her go, filed the information with the same careful attention she had been applying to this floor for 3 months. By the following Tuesday, the structural review had concluded. 2 senior partner positions were eliminated alongside Serena's. The lease was signed at a 15% increase, not the proposed 22%, in exchange for a 5-year term and a facilities upgrade that Daniel had already contracted out to a firm that was not Pinnacle. He called Pinnacle on Monday to give his notice. His supervisor asked if he'd found something better. He said he had. His supervisor said he'd been one of the best workers they'd had on that account and asked if he'd consider going back some time. Daniel said he appreciated that. He meant it. He also called Rachel Park, not to offer anything, not yet, to ask a question. The question was whether she had considered, at any point in the past 3 months, what she would do with a mentorship from someone who had spent 11 years learning what every kind of floor in a building felt like. Rachel Park was quiet for a moment. "Who is this exactly?" she said. "Daniel Voss," he said. "We met in the copy room." A pause. He could hear the pieces assembling. "Second shelf," she said slowly. "Real estate?" "Yes." "You own the building?" "Yes." A longer pause. "You spent 9 months," she said, with the careful tone of someone arriving at the edge of a large conclusion, "mopping floors in a building you owned." "I wanted to know what I owned," he said, "not just the number." She was quiet. He waited. He had learned, in 9 months of service work and a lifetime before it, that some silences were someone thinking and some silences were someone deciding, and that both deserved the same patience. "The mentorship," she said finally. "What would that look like?" "Coffee," he said. "Actual coffee at a table where neither of us is wiping anything. We figure it out from there." She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and an exhale. The sound of someone who had been watching carefully for 3 months and had decided that what she was seeing was real. "Thursday," she said. "Noon." "Thursday," he agreed. 3 weeks later, Daniel woke at 5. He did not have a cart to collect or a lanyard to put on. He had calls this morning, the Morrow building refinancing, a conversation with Clara about 2 new acquisition targets, a check-in with the property manager he'd hired for 31 when Pinnacle's contract ended. He had a full day, and it would be conducted, for the first time in 9 months, from a desk that had his name on it. He made coffee, stood at the kitchen window. The morning was ordinary and clear. Penny appeared at 6:30, both shoes already on, book in hand, efficient. "Are you going to the office today?" she said. "Yes." She considered this. "In the suit?" "In the suit." She sat at the table, helped herself to orange juice, looked at him across the kitchen with the same unhurried assessment she'd been deploying since she was 4. "Did you figure out what you needed to figure out?" she said. He looked at his daughter, at the morning light, at the apartment that had seemed smaller than the house until it had turned out to be exactly the right size. "Yes," he said. She nodded, opened her book. "Good," she said. "Make the eggs then." He made the eggs. While he did, he thought about Thursday, about a coffee that was already on the calendar and which had, in the 3 weeks since the call, expanded to include a second coffee and a longer conversation about what Rachel Park actually wanted from the next 10 years and whether the firms she'd been considering understood what they had in her. He had found, over 2 coffees and 1 very long lunch, that she was exactly who he'd thought she was, from the elevator and the copy room and the 4-inch distance she'd moved from Serena Marsh the morning of the conference room. Sharp, honest, not performing anything. Interested in how buildings, real ones, not just the financials, actually worked. He thought the firm he was building quietly, from the desk he was going back to today, could use someone like that. He also thought in the part of his mind that he applied to personal matters with considerably less analysis and considerably more uncertainty. That Thursday coffee had started feeling like something else. Something he was moving toward at the speed of a person who'd learned, in a gray uniform in a service stairwell, that the right pace for things was not always the fastest one. He put the eggs in front of Penny. She ate them. She was reading while she ate, which she was technically not supposed to do. And he let it go because it was a Tuesday, and she was 9, and some rules existed to be negotiated. "Dad," she said without looking up. "Yeah." "The woman from Thursday, Rachel." He looked at her. "What about her?" Penny turned a page. "You should invite her for eggs," she said. "Not to a restaurant. Here. Eggs tell you more about a person." He looked at his daughter, at her book, at the way she said things that were too accurate for the age she was, which she had been doing since approximately forever. "When did you meet her?" he said. Penny turned another page. "I haven't," she said. "But you talk about her the way you talked about the Morrow building before you bought it." He was quiet for a moment. "That's very different," he said. "It really isn't," said Penny. She finished her eggs, collected her things, kissed his cheek at the door. He stood at the kitchen window after she left and finished his coffee and watched the morning do its ordinary work. And he thought that his daughter was, as usual, probably right. He texted Rachel. "Different question. Eggs Saturday? I know a kitchen with a good window." He put his phone in his pocket, picked up his jacket, went to work. The reply came before he reached the elevator. "I was wondering when you'd stop being careful about this." He read it twice, smiled at it once, put it away. He took the north elevator. It arrived in 9 seconds. He made a note to tell Victor.